Hello, it's me, Ethan, and I'm here to explain your character since you asked me to. Kiley, this is your character, a level 3 barbarian, level 17 druid wood elf character with an outlander background. This character analysis is not to explain your character in full depth, but just to simply explain the technicalities and the specific features that is down on here, and maybe a little bit of combat. I don't really know what I'm doing, but we're just gonna roll with it. I bookmarked certain places in the book which I want to cover, starting with your race. As I said earlier, you are a wood elf. That means that as an elf, your dexterity is increased by 2, and as the wood elf subrace, your wisdom is increased by 1. That's stat-wise. I'm not going to talk to you about stats a bunch because I'm going to show you a character sheet tomorrow. Let's see. As an elf, you have dark vision, which means that you can see in the dark. You have keen senses, which means you're proficient in perception. You have Fey ancestry, which means you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic cannot put you to sleep. Hand in hand with that comes trance. Elves do not need to sleep. Instead, they meditate deeply, remaining semi-conscious for 4 hours a day, aka trance. While meditating, they can dream in such a fashion, but such dreams are actually mental exercises that have become reflexive throughout years of practice. And after resting this way, you gain the same benefit that a human would from 8 hours of sleep. Not really relevant, but figured I'd say it. You can speak, read, and write Common and Elvish, which is how it goes, yes. And as for the wood elf subrace, all that stuff was just normal elf stuff. This stuff is special for wood elves. Your wisdom increased by 1, which I said already. You get elf weapon training, which means you have proficiency with the long sword, short bow, and longbow. You have fleet of foot, which means your base walking speed increases to 35 feet instead of 30. That's important during combat because that's how many feet that you are allowed to walk before an action can be spent. It means you can go faster. Mask of the Wild. You can attempt to hide even when you are only lightly obscured by foliage, heavy rain, falling snow, mist, and other natural phenomena. That's cool. You can hide really easily in nature. And that completes my wood elf deep analysis. Now, to go into the class stuff. I mentioned to you before that this is a multi-class of a barbarian and a druid. Mostly a druid, but still a little bit of barbarian that is really relevant, and that's what we're going over first. The 3 levels of barbarian that I put on your character. Go here. Well, first of all, the most important quality of this is the raging mechanic. Let me read just this paragraph section of raging for you. In battle, you fight with primal ferocity. On your turn, you can enter a rage as a bonus action. While raging, you gain the following benefits if you aren't wearing heavy armor, which you won't be, because druids don't wear armor. You won't be wearing armor at all. You'll just be wearing normal stuff. But anyway, the benefits are as follows. You have advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. When you make a melee attack using strength, you gain a bonus to the damage roll that increases as you gain levels as a barbarian, as shown in the rage damage column of the barbarian table. That's not going to matter, really. You have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. That matters a lot. That means that you can tank a lot of hits a lot easier. Basically, resistance just cuts in half any damage that you're about to take. Sucky part is that you cannot cast spells while you're raging, which is kind of sucky as a druid, but it's okay because you can use the rage mechanic while being an animal thanks to druid. But we'll get into that later. One of the more important parts, unarmored defense, which is why you're not going to be wearing armor. If you're not wearing armor, your armor class equals 10 plus dexterity and constitution modifiers added together. And a shield. I don't think I brought you a shield. I did not give you a shield. Your character's armor class is 18, which means a character, if they're trying to hit you, has to roll at least an 18 to be able to hit you and actually do damage. That is good. You have the reckless attack feature. Starting at 2nd level, you can throw aside all concern for defense to attack with fierce desperation. When you make your first attack on your turn, you can decide to attack recklessly. Doing so gives you advantage on melee attack rolls using strength during this turn, but attack rolls against you have advantage until your next turn. Advantage means that any roll that you have advantage on, you roll the thing twice and then choose the higher one as your roll. Disadvantage is the opposite. When you roll twice and then choose the lower option. So basically, this means that you have a better chance to hit your opponent, but afterwards your opponent has a better chance of hitting you. Kind of a double-edged sword. But you have a high AC and you have high health. You should be alright, especially as an animal. Danger sense. You have advantage on dexterity saving throws against effects you can see, such as traps and spells. To gain this benefit, you can't be blinded, deafened, or incapacitated. That just gives you like spidey sense to avoid traps. Probably not that necessary, especially in combat. It's not that big a deal. Now, here comes the funny part, the fun part. Primal paths, which is going to be the last thing that you get as a barbarian. Primal path. I gave you the wild magic path, which basically, I'm not going to bother pulling it up, but wild magic is interesting, especially as a barbarian, because that means when you rage, you'll have to roll on a table that gives you a specific random effect that happens while you rage. Some examples that I can just recall on the top of my head is teleporting to different locations at the beginning of each turn, which leaves your enemy in trouble, not being able to detect where you are all the time because you're always teleporting around. There's one where a bunch of like plants grow around your feet, making people hard to run at you and hard to escape you because plants will grab them. There's one where a bunch of dark like tentacles sprout out of the ground around you and start hitting people for you. Those are just a couple of them. I believe there is 8 complete ones that you can roll on once you rage. They're all very interesting and useful effects. Now, the reason I multi-classed into Barbarian 3 levels is mainly because of the fun wild magic, but also because of the rage mechanic. It gives you resistance to a lot of attacks. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter, because rage, what it usually does is gives you better like weapon attacks, but you're not going to be using weapons as a druid. You're going to be using spells, and you can transform into animals and just use natural body attacks. Which leads me right into druid. Now, as a druid, you will be receiving this ability to cast spells, which wisdom will be your casting stat. Not really necessary for you to know, but from a combat sense, I just figured I'd tell you in this video. It's whatever. You get wild shape. Starting at 2nd level, you can use your action to magically assume the shape of a beast that you've seen before. You can use this feature twice. You regain expended uses when you finish a short or long rest, and your druid determines the level of beast you can transform into. That doesn't really matter because we got the path in the druidic circle, the circle of the moon, which allows you to become stronger creatures. The wild shape in itself, without the circle of the moon, only allows you to become like very small, weak animals. But thanks to the circle of the moon, you can become very powerful animals. with a challenge rating of 5 or lower. You don't know what that means, but that means that you can transform into a couple things that I listed that were like the best options out of the book. I scrutinized it. You could become a giant crocodile. You become a giant eagle. You could become a brontosaurus, a triceratops, a cave bear, a dire wolf, and you can look for other stuff too if you want, but those are the most useful ones in my opinion. Those are going to change your hit points, your stats. They'll make you stronger in strength and constitution, and usually they'll give you cool things like multi-attacks, where you can attack once or more than one time per turn. And they'll make you into a really versatile tank. And with the rage also activated, you have resistances to a lot of attacks. So it works out very well with you. Moving on. That's pretty much all the Druidic Circle of Moon does for you. It allows you to transform into those. Oh, sorry, I also forgot. You can transform into elemental creatures, such as fire elementals, air elementals, water, and earth elementals, which are all viable choices. You'll have to scrutinize them later. I'll bring the book. You can look at them. The rest of the Druid stuff just kind of focuses on wild shape, which I already explained to you. So I'm not going to go over it again. That's pretty much all you have to know, besides the fact that you are also, if you don't want to go down the transforming beast tank route, you can also just simply be a druid with casting. As a druid, you know 4 cantrips, which are basically free spells. You don't have to spend any sort of spell slot to use them. You can use them an unlimited amount of times. And you have 23 known spells that require slots. I'm not going to tell them all to you, because that would take way too long, and I'm already getting sick and tired of this. I'll send you the list of spells. You can look them up if you want to and see all the cool stuff that they do. I handpicked them, so I know they're good. And that concludes my semi-deep analysis of the combat of your character, Azuri Galanodal.